Thank you, Roger. My name is Jane Goodsill, and I have just written a book. And through writing my book, I got introduced to Virginia, who has just written the book. So my book is called Voices of Hawaii, and I interviewed many people in Hawaii about their experiences, life experiences. And then I took the best parts of their stories and put them in the book. And that is just by way of introduction. And now I would like to set up Virginia by reading a quote from my book. And this is about my mother, whose name is Ruth. So here I go. During the summers, Ruth sat in her living room chair and read out loud to us. She was like the Pied Piper, and soon neighborhood children of all ages gathered at her feet to listen to King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, the Chronicles of Narnia, Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel, and the Microbe Hunters. So Virginia read my book, and when she read that, she had some thoughts, and I want to turn it over to you. Would you prefer me to call you Virginia or Ginger?
Either does, it'd be fine.
Thank you. Tell me why you were amused when you read that little passage in my book.
Well, I absolutely love the Microbe Hunters. It sparked my initial interest in science. And so when I read that about your mother, I said, what a smart woman. Because the Microbe Hunters, about pioneers in medicine who discovered diseases and then took efforts to prevent them. And so I was reading a lot more about science because of that book. And also it drove me to read about other scientists like Alexander Fleming, who discovered penicillin and made such a huge difference in the world. And so I decided to enter a science fair and grow penicillin mold like Fleming had done.
Of course you did.
Yeah. And so I was reading, and I obviously misread because I thought it said, well, the book probably said that you should grow the mold on pot liquor, which is the leftover fluid from cooking vegetables because there's a lot of nutrients. But I thought it said corn liquor, which is moonshine. And so I went to my mother and I said, well, I can't do my science project because we don't have any moonshine. And my mother thought for a couple minutes, and then she said, that's not a problem. She says, I know the probate judge who handles all the moonshine cases in the town we lived in. So we'll go to the courthouse and ask for some of the evidence after the trial. So we did, and he let us have the moonshine. And my mold absolutely loved it, grew beautifully, and I won the science fair, and I became a microbiologist. But the big lesson I learned was from my mother about you have to take every opportunity to knock the T off the word can't. And
The subtitle is about being an audacious academic. Tell me what that means to you.
Well, not having much fear and being a little outlandish. I was different as being a woman, in science, and I just never hesitated to try to knock the T off the word can't and get things done. And I was kind of, I'm an extrovert, and I enjoyed people and liked interacting, and I liked laughing and having a good time.
Good explanation. Okay.
What you see is what you get.
What you see is what you get. And you spent quite a bit of time in Hawaii. Do you want to tell us that part of your story?
Yeah, I moved to Hawaii, and I came to serve as Chancellor of UH Mānoa. And I was at UC Davis at the time and hadn't thought about moving, but then I decided when the people called me from Hawaii, I said, they may need some of the experience I had, and so maybe it's a good match. You always look to see if it matches your experience and their needs. And it looked like an exciting adventure in a lot of ways and unique place. I love Hawaii, and I think it's very unique in the university. I hope people realize what a jewel it actually is. And I worked at recently at 3 land grant public universities, and our mission is to solve society's problems. And so I love that activity, and then educating the next generation for their lives. And so decided to undertake that event. And then I stepped down and after 5 years, and then I worked in the med school where I started the mini medical school on healthy aging for the public, which was a great joy too. So it's been a wonderful experience. And I think Hawaii is a very unique, special place.
So tell us why a specialty in virology would have been valued at the University of Hawaii.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of researchers go into administration. And the reason being is that in research, you're problem solving and you work as a team. You know, you can only do your job if every team member does theirs. And that's very similar in a lot of ways to administration. You have a situation, you have a problem, you want to make a plan about how to address it or how to advance it. And then you test certain things to see if they work and then analyze the data. And then if they don't work, you make another plan. And that's the same as you're doing research in order to make progress.
So when you went to University of Hawaii, you were in the administration, and how did your audaciousness work in that arena?
Well, it's a lot of times you have to, I believe that a chancellor has to interact with the public and get to know them and find out what they think about the university, and actually kind of being kind of audacious worked for that. I wore hats all the time and did lots of things and spoke on viruses. I still work on viruses intellectually. And I think it helped bring people closer, I hope, to the university. We're regular people. We, want to interact and hear what they have to say and think. And sometimes you have to be a little audacious to make that happen.
And did virology have anything to do with your interest in the aging that you talked about?
Well, in a way, yes, it did, because I worked on influenza virus in humans, lower mammals, and birds for over 20 years. And of course, the biggest impact was on the older population. And so I would often spend a lot of time with older people, trying to encourage them to get vaccinated, learn about the viruses. And so I think, it did impact. And I had a lot of reasons for thinking the mini med school would be good for Hawaii. First of all, we have an aging population. Secondly, we have a lot of great people in the community that are interested in this topic. We've got a great department of geriatrics. And there's a respect for kupuna in Hawaii that does not exist in a lot of places because of the Asian and the Native Hawaiian cultures.
I couldn't agree. I could not agree more. In my previous life, before I started researching things in Hawaii and started writing the book, I was a psychotherapist. And this goes right along with overall wellness as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, beautifully said. So have your grand mules read the book?
Yes. Oh, that's a requirement. They all got their copies. Then my granddaughter just pointed out to me, see, Grand, it's on the top shelf.
It's on the top shelf. So I don't know if you feel like talking about this, but I wondered, since you conducted all your influenza studies, if you might want to tell us some things about what we're experiencing in the pandemic days.
Well, I could talk about that forever, but I'll be brief. I worked on those influenza viruses for over 20 years and also worked internationally. So, these viruses are not local, they're global. And so you have to work with your international population to keep them healthy as well as you.
Are you talking about the coronavirus, or are you talking about flu viruses, or all the viruses you've been studying through your career?
Well, influenza has been my major focus, but this certainly is true for coronaviruses like COVID-19 virus. I'll compare and contrast a little bit. But first of all, we're in a pandemic. And a lot of people don't realize what it means when you have a pandemic, but it means you have a new agent, like a virus for humans. It causes a lot of death and disease, and it spreads easily person to person worldwide. We have other epidemics where it doesn't spread all across the world. Now, flu has caused a number of pandemics. There's not much doubt about that. This is the first time we've had a coronavirus like COVID-19 cause a pandemic. They have some characteristics in common. They're respiratory. They also have large animal reservoirs. For influenza, it's particularly migratory birds like ducks, and that's probably been there for millennia. Coronavirus is bats. There's a huge reservoir of those in bats. And so a lot of people always ask me, well, how did they get to humans? Well, it takes close contact. But one of the things we look at a lot are the live animal markets, where they have all these different species together, and then humans walking by, in close contact. And so that's the reason you hear a lot about those, because that's where the transmission can occur, because these are both what we call zoonotic viruses, meaning they can move across species from animals to humans. And in this case, of course, we have a pandemic due to coronavirus. And it's traumatic. It's amazing to me that the US is #1 in the number of cases and deaths, and it's very disappointing. The way we can help control that is certainly by vaccination. And vaccines have done wonders for human health. Eradicated smallpox, almost have eradicated polio, measles, all these diseases. So vaccines are just really enormously important. And I'm very excited about the new messenger RNA vaccines. I think that will revolutionize and improve vaccines as a whole. But we also have to have people take them. So one of our challenges is misinformation, conspiracy, politics, fear. And so I often tell people, well, I certainly took the COVID-19 vaccine to reduce the risk of disease and death for myself, but also for you. That is what we need to do. We need to do it for ourselves, but also for each other. So, and that's the way we can control pandemics. We will have another, and there are lots of viruses out there that can cause them. So we have to be prepared, and we have to take actions like vaccines.
When I was reading your book, I was interested in some of the things you talked about respiratory tract of mammals, page 167. Do you remember any part of that?
Yeah, influenza in mammals is respiratory, but in migratory waterfowl like ducks, it's intestinal. And so I spent a lot of time with duck feces and bird feces and isolating viruses. And the reason it then continues in that population is because it's waterborne. And so they can keep passing it on, and they all have flyways, and they go around and around each year. And so, and it typically does not make the bird sick. There are a few nasty avian viruses that will make birds sick, but most of the ducks have absolutely no problems, just like the bats don't seem to have any problems with the coronaviruses.
Well, has there been any transmission from birds to humans?
Well, we have a lot of evidence, yes, of what flu does. You're talking about flu now?
I don't know enough about it to ask the right question, but you had talked about birds and you had talked about fish, and I was wondering. You had told us the bats could transmit to humans. Now I'm wondering about ducks and the migratory birds.
The migratory birds, what happens with avian flu is it's continually certain. The birds have all the different subtypes of influenza viruses. Okay, so they got them all. And so what happens on rare occasions, it's not real common, but if you have an infection of one cell, either a human or a duck, with an avian virus and a human virus, the viruses can swap genes, and you can get a new gene introduced that comes out, which then can cause a pandemic because we haven't seen that particular product before. That's one way influenza virus causes pandemics.
But we're just paying attention to this one in a different way, different than we ever had with the flu.
Yeah, well, this one, the coronaviruses, there are a lot of coronaviruses in bats, and so they could easily exchange genes too, and that's what they're watching for. And mutation. Both of these viruses, flu and COVID-19 virus, mutate. And that's why we changed the vaccine for flu each year. And with the COVID-19, we had the Delta variant, which is more infectious and contagious, and it became dominant because it spreads more readily.
When I retired from being a practicing psychotherapist, I still practice, but I do it in a mentoring capacity. And what I'm doing is teaching what I know to other people so that they can find some solace in their own lives. And they're learning how to do what I do so they can share it with other people. And it's the people who've taught me, I'm so grateful for. And then we have the ability to pass it on to others. And I think it's a life gift.
I was also telling people that, okay, I can help you not make the mistakes I made, but you can make your very own.
Say that again.
I said, I'll help you not make the mistakes I made, but then you can make your own.
Yeah, I can't prevent you from making your own, and you will learn a lot from making those mistakes. I want to tell the people in our audience that we are very happy to answer questions. So please send them in if you will. Also, I have one more question I want to ask you, which is leadership. How do you define a leader? Is that a fair question to ask you, Ginger?
Well, I have a quote that I always, it's not a quote, I made it up, but I carried it around with me all the time. A leader is a person with a vision, passion, and ability to achieve the goals and maintain the values of the people they serve. And I think both of those are intertwined and should be.
And so would you say that again for us?
Okay. A leader is a person with the vision, passion, and ability to achieve the goals and maintain the values of the people they serve.
Very good. Very
and
good.
I think you do that by promoting the ability of others to succeed. A lot of times if people think, you've got to have people around you that are doing wonderful things and activities. And if you help them succeed, you are successful, but it's their success you're after.
And that is nice. And that can be a very satisfying niche to be in, to help others to succeed. Which now I have another question to ask you. What is it that you like to do? What are you passionate about and doing with your retirement?
Well, I still teach. I love to teach. I've always thought that's a wonderful profession.
And what are you teaching?
I teach graduate students in virology. And I sometimes teach on leadership or women's issues or viruses, whatever, but typically graduate students. And I serve on some boards of nonprofits and feel that that's a great contribution to the community. And I have to admit, during this last year, one of my areas of focus has to be with people I love and enjoy, because we've been shut off from them for a while. And so that's one of the reasons for our trips this summer is to be with those folks and enjoy their company and tell them you love them.
Yeah. And I think you in person, but I think you accomplished that. Obviously, you told your people that you love them and showed them how you love them by writing this book. It shows through in every page. The stories you tell about them, the stories you tell to them, the errors that you can share about what things you've made mistakes with and the things you've had success with. I think you clearly share that with your family and your readers. Is there anything else you wanted to say about your book? Well, you can tell people where they can get it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And show the picture of it.
And it's on Amazon.
My heart smiles.
An ebook, black and white or color print. And I actually think it's really a neat exercise down memory lane. When you have to choose, and you had this with experience clearly with all the interviews you did, you have to choose certain things that you can include. But it makes you think about them and re-enjoy them or wish differently for them or whatever. But it's really a nice adventure. I thought of it as an adventure. Thinking about the joys and the traumas, because there are traumas in life. Whether it's cancer or death or whatever. But it's good to think about those and relive your own adventures and see what's so very precious about your own life, not just somebody else's.
Yeah. I did have an experience. I interviewed so many people for my book, over 75, and the book is only 200 pages, and I had to figure out which stories would encapsulate the concepts that they were so courageous in sharing with me, and then how I could put them into chapters that people could easily read and digest, understand history, and understand humanity. Similar in some ways to you're sharing life lessons, and the people I interviewed were sharing their life stories, and I got to share some of the things they said.
Well, I thought your book was great. It was like memory lane to me, because I know a lot of these people.
Do you?
So it was really interesting. Oh yeah. And I think I love humor, and I think that your humor comes through, and in my life, we're kind of funny in a lot of ways. And my husband and I said we laugh a lot. I said a lot of times at each other, but that's okay.
I have a story to tell about that. Parents would come and they would bring their adolescents for therapy, and it was serious, because the kid is just not functioning and the parents aren't happy and the kids, so I meet with them together, and then the parent goes into the waiting room, but it's not soundproof. And I'm in there with the kid, and after a little while, the kid and I are just laughing. And the parents going, what could they possibly be laughing about? We could laugh about the way the kid would say, well, this is what's happening in the household. This is how so-and-so's reacting. And I'd say, well, to quote Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? And they'd say, it's not. And I'd just start laughing. And so would they. And it just changed everything. And I said, okay, is there another way to do this? Do you want to keep living like this? So yeah.
Yeah, laughter is really good for you. I haven't actually give a talk about that. It induces endorphins, which are the feel-good hormones, which runners get, but I don't run, so I won't get them that way.
Well, you get it from throwing your javelin, from throwing your broomsticks.
And laughing. And then it reduces stress hormones like cortisol. It relaxes your muscles for up to 45 minutes after you have a good laugh. Induces natural killer cells to help your immunity. I mean, it's really good for you.